Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Token. I'm still working on the Absolute Green Lantern video. I'm just doing voiceover work for it right now. And I'm doing another movie review. Today I'm going to be talking about Spider-Man Brand New Day. I watched it opening night, but I haven't had the chance to talk about it until now. It is currently 10:34 p.m. so I'm going to try and be a little bit quiet. It's to be, respectful towards my mom and my sister. That being said, let's get started in our conversation. Spider-Man Brand New Day was probably Tom Holland's best movie in my opinion. I give it a solid 8 out of 10 because the ending of it was fairly weak in my opinion. The resolution was weak. But everything else was amazing. From the characters to the build up to the climax. Where do I get started? I guess I'll get started with the opening of the movie, where we see an isolated Peter Parker moving into a new apartment. You see everything that's been happening behind the scenes. Spider-Man is self-isolating. He's distracting himself from his mental health through work. He's essentially working around the clock to mask his own, depression or whatever you want to call it. And he's isolating himself because that's all he knows. Everyone he knows is going to get hurt if he doesn't. So he's essentially, which builds us up to the four side characters that we are introduced that he parallels to insanely well. We see if I will get into them as this video goes on, but let's start off with, let's keep talking about the movie. We essentially see the characters that Peter's been working with on the side. We see the characters, what Peter's been doing as well. He's stopped people like Lonnie or Tombstone from, cleaned up the city from mob related crimes. He has been doing, stopped Scorpion again. So none of his villains have died, which thank the Lord, if I'm being honest. That's an issue I think Marvel has. They kill off way too many of their villains, and now they're running circles trying to find someone new to use. Where do I keep going with this? To follow that up, you have his first introduction where he's chasing down a runaway tank, a runaway DODC tank. That will be important later. He's interrupted by Frank Castle. We're introduced to the Punisher, who is a great parallel to Peter's story because he is someone else who is still damaged from the loss of everyone he loves. And it's essentially, hey, if you don't get help, kid, you're essentially going to become me. They don't say it out loud, but it's a very blatant parallel that you can make. And Frank's over here, he's essentially just, they do banter back and forth a good bit, opposing morals, who saved who kind of situations. But that's besides the point. Let's keep on going. Peter stops Frank from doing Frank shit, killing anybody. Kicks him out of his own moving van and just leaves him on the side of the road while he stops the DODC and realizes, hey, there's a bigger player over here trying to break into the DODC, but I don't know who it is. So he's going around, he's doing his own task, looking through everything, and he can't find any connections. But he does have someone who does know stuff. So let's talk to his second cameoed friend, Yelena Belova. Yelena is introduced as a carefree skeptic, which is odd to say. Her office is set up in a bathhouse. She is just introduced naked, sitting in a bathtub, in a sauna. you know, and apparently that's her office, quote unquote. Which, yeah. And so Peter over here is saying, he's essentially asking her for help, and she says, "All right, get in. You're asking me for help, Beth." It's a funny little back and forth they have until you realize, oh, she's being skeptical. She's asking him to get into the bathhouse because of the fact that she wants to see if he has any weapons on him. So that's a good one. So you have this little back and forth between them, and he gets some information from her that he finds out and goes to keep on working. Essentially, he's going through and he finds the primary antagonist of the villain, who still hasn't been revealed, hopping from place to place. Forgot to mention there is a total of 3 conflicts in the movie. So this is all happening while he's going. He finds out he finds the primary villain. Primary villain is looking through his stuff, and he doesn't know him. No, he doesn't know any of this because apparently, the villain's a telepath of sorts. Which, let's be honest, it's been a month. You already know who the villain is. For the sake of review, I'm not revealing it yet. Which is another thing that I found great. The build up of the suspense. Who is this villain? Was, I'm being honest, I didn't want to believe the reviews. I didn't want to believe the leakers. I thought it was going to be Mr. Negative. It wasn't. Oh well. That's my one problem with, you know, Tom Spider-Man is like everything he does has to build up to a bigger story, has to be tied into something else. He doesn't have his own movie quite yet, so it's like, for his first movie, it's a bit of a downfall. Now, where do we continue? Uh, the secondary villain found out who he is. He's being stressed the fuck out. This is how I'm gonna tie this into talking to about the secondary conflict that is Peter slowly losing himself due to his self isolation. He is losing control. He's becoming irrational. You think it's a build up for Venom with all this talk of VMAX. It's not. I'm gonna just cut that straight. It is a Man Spider kind of situation. They cut any scenes involving Man Spider, but his body is essentially being overwritten by the spider DNA because he is so stressed. And it's one of those situations where you're not sure what's going to happen next because he's constantly going through, oh, his spider sense is being overloaded, or you're going through situations where he's constantly being attacked or bombarded, and he's losing control whenever he's losing a fight because he's constantly holding back like Spider-Man does. So he's creating an inhibitor chip for himself to stop his DNA from suppressing him. But he doesn't know how to do that. So we're introduced to the third cameo character, which is Yelena, as I forgot to mention, she is a parallel to Peter in the story that she already went through. Her overarching character of a found family and having to open up. That being said, third character, you have the Hulk, or Bruce Banner, who is teaching uh, I think it's an ESU class. I forget. There's so many colleges in New York. That being said, yes, you see Bruce Banner's teaching an ESU class. That's where Peter learns about his gauntlet. Essentially, they're cracking jokes back and forth while Peter's interrogating him unknowingly about the inhibitor gauntlet that he made for himself. And one of the main jokes that he has is, hey, this is very dangerous technology if it gets into the wrong hands. But also, if you see me without it, run away. Which is foreshadowing, where we will cut back to the whole overarching character arc with the main villain. Uh, Peter leaves ESU after trying to make his own. after making his own inhibitor chip, which keeps on failing because of something they didn't take into account, which is his own mask's AI system or EMP field overheating it, and he learns how to fix it from Frank. You know, or no, it was from MJ. He learned how to fix. Was it MJ? I can't remember. I need to rewatch the movie. But that's besides the point. So we see that he needs. He sees that he needs help, and he sees that the people he cares about's in danger. So because he had his mind read. So who does he go to? Who does he try to find? He goes to MJ because he realizes that the one person, or well, while he was going back to where I said earlier, the main villain, found out who he was and was going through his stuff. So, main villain finding out who he was, going through his stuff, MJ's in trouble. He goes to save her. We get reintroduced to Frank after MJ's life gets put in danger by the telepath who is controlling her without Peter knowing because he has to race telepathy, jumping 5 meters per person to be exact. And so, after realizing how much trouble MJ is, Peter takes her to Frank. That's where he gets his inhibitor chip fixed. And that is where we continue the story. Peter has to go to the DODC after finding out where the next attack's going to be. He's trying to warn them, but it's already too late. That's also where we find out who the main villain is, which we learn is Jean Grey. I thought it was going to be Mr. Negative because I didn't want to believe the spoilers, but it's Jean. Big whoop, right? How do I break this next part down? Jean is essentially trying to find any information on this thing called VMAX to find her sister. Because all she remembers is that her sister was taken from her. And that's that. So she's going through and she possessed the Hulk to try and get to the employees. And you got this whole thing going on where they're going back and forth. Yada yada yada. Uh, and Peter shows up trying to stop her. But that doesn't help. That doesn't do anything because she's got the Hulk. And he has to save Frank because MJ said, hey, the kid needs help. Big whoop, right? So you get this little back and forth between them. They end up having to fight Jean, who is controlling the Hulk. And, you had this little comedic scene of Jean and, not Jean, Peter and Frank going back and forth about the MCU can't take serious moments serious. But in the Spider-Man movie, it fits because it's Spider-Man, right? He doesn't take anything seriously. So they're continuing their little back and forth, and Jean is continuing her thing, doing her thing. And essentially, while the fight gets started, Peter takes the Hulk, Frank takes Jean. Frank doesn't want to deal with the Hulk, so he takes Jean, of course. Peter grudgingly gives in. And that's where, while they're fighting, Peter puts the inhibitor chip on his inhibitor chip onto Jean. And, he stops her. She loses control of the. Or, not Peter. Fuck. Frank puts an inhibitor chip on Jean. That's where she loses control of Hulk. And, you see Bruce. He is in trouble, to say the least. He's trying to tell Peter to get away because he doesn't have the gauntlet on. And Peter's trying to give him his own inhibitor chip. It's a universal one, so it should work on him. We get terrifying Hulk back after not seeing him since Infinity War. With a quick quip, oh, I didn't know you could get that big. He could. And it was a sight to see. Now, of course, for some reason, Peter and Brute, while Hulk is hulking out, Peter and Peter's trying to save everyone from a rampaging Hulk. One of the things Peter says is, "Bruce, it's me. I'm your friend." One, Hulk hates being called Bruce, but at the same time, Hulk is an inner child, uh, trying to protect Bruce from an abusive relationship with his father. So it makes sense. He's a victim of DID essentially, and domestic abuse. Now, where am I going with this? Right, Hulk is a parallel to Peter, essentially what he becomes if he keeps on isolating himself. But that little connection they have, hey, I'm Bruce's friend, essentially tells, Bruce, you know what? That's right. I need to help him out. And Bruce essentially drops down. Now we continue with the ODC plot line. Jean Grey has been captured. Hulk is being sent to a mental asylum. I'm pretty sure they're going down after Brave New World. They're going to be going down a Hulk storyline with that, but I'm not sure they're going to be able to build a character arc. That being said, Jean gets taken into custody. DLDC has all these things going back and forth. While before they were able to stop Jean, though, she got into the main dude's head trying to find out what VMAX is. Peter interrogates him and says, "Hey, whenever she was in your head, what did you see?" Right? And that's one of those things where it's like, "Oh, you said something about Sarah," and he says to Peter, "Yeah, Sarah was an old flame kind of thing." And so he takes it at face value because he doesn't know the first thing. The only time he got possessed, he kicked her out of her head. He he kicked her out of his head, and we continue onwards. Nothing happened. You think, oh, movie's over. It's probably gonna be a part two, building up into the mutant saga. That's not true. We still got a good chunk of the movie. So, running off to do his thing, being skeptical, he goes to talk to MJ, take her from Frank's little boathouse dock to back home, where they run into Ned. They have this little back and forth. It's reminiscent of whenever Ned first found out that Peter was Spider-Man. They look like friends, MJ says, and that shit was heart touching. This was a very emotional movie. But let's continue. Whew. Essentially, he talks about everything that had happened, the back and forth and so on, and then the topic of what she saw whenever she was being possessed comes on, and MJ says, "Oh, it was like I was unconscious. I didn't see anything." And Peter realizes that the dude lied to her. So you got this back and forth going on again, and Peter realizes he has to leave, and he's got to fix something he fucked up. So he makes his way over to the raft because every other facility has been blown up or shut down because of Jean. And he's trying to save her because he wants answers. Well, not save her in that moment. He wants answers, and he realizes, oh, you're not going to let me interrogate her or you. Alright, we're gonna do this the hard way kind of thing. And there's this intense moment where Peter's trying to come to his own terms with himself, because as he's going on, as he's going through, Jean is being experimented on. She's being sent through this whole boom, 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 being forced to activate her thing. And eventually she's overloaded, and she's slumped back in her chair. Hold on. She's slumped back in her chair, staring at the ceiling, nose all bloody, because her brain's been overloaded. She's over here staring at an air vent where she sees the vent is reading one phrase that she's been looking into this whole time: VMAX. The entire build up for VMAX is telling you this is some secret, testing facility. Maybe it's Venom, maybe it's whatever. VMAX stands for Ventilation Max, and the sticker with the name is peeling off. VMAX is the last thing Jean Grey's sister saw before she died. That is it. It's nothing special. And because of that, Jean snaps. She unlocks a good portion of her power. And she takes over 1 kilometer of New York around. Peter's able to break free while he's on there trying to help. And Jean's not having it. Jean is trying to interrogate the people who killed her sister. And by God, she was pissed. So she's going around, she's doing her interrogation. And she gets real up close and personal with the director of the DODC. She's threatening his life as well as the others, and Peter's over here trying to stop, help her, because he doesn't know what's happening. Peter's going through a lot right now. And essentially, she shows off to Peter that, hey, fun fact, while you were helping them, they were making weapons to stop you, like a sonic cannon that essentially shredded his webbing kind of situation. And he has to get involved in some shape, way, or form. And he's getting his ass beat because his powers are being overloaded again by, the stress that he's under. Having to fight the hand, having to fight, all these other people. And in that moment, while everything's happening, Frank is noticing, hey, something ain't right, and he has to fix it because Peter won't. And he goes off. He sets up a little sniper station. That's background noise for now. While Peter is essentially trying to talk to Jean, talk her down, while he's being stressed out and while he's trying to come to terms with his own mortality, because he is currently undergoing a lot of physical trauma due to his powers overloading, he has to stop himself. And he has to tap in to his powers. So he's able to get control. He's able to take the day again, use his own, internal webbing, because he wasn't able, his actual webbing isn't cutting it because it keeps being diluted. He has to use his spider sense to its full ability, and it works because the hand is too much. And he eventually gets to break free. He stops the mind controlled people, and he gets to Jean. There, he lets her into his mind because he understands her pain. He understands the wanting to kill the very person who took everything you loved from you. And he understands how strong you have to be not to do it. So they have this little heart-to-heart. Spider-Man opens up his mind to Jean, and Jean essentially gets into his head and has a talk to Aunt May. Jean learns that Spider-Man does understand what she went through. And while all this is happening, while she's having this coming to moment, Frank, who is still in panic mode, who doesn't know what's happening, who sees that a 1 block radius, thousands of lives are in danger, he pulls the trigger, trying to shoot Jean. And Spider-Man takes the bullet for her. And you get this emotional moment where Frank has to rush Peter to the hospital. He stops the doctors from taking off the mask, cutting up the suit. Jean, who's feels like she's partially responsible while he's unconscious, is breathing for him. And this entire time, while Frank is at Spider-Man's bedside, this entire time he's been unconscious, Frank has been at Spider-Man's bedside. And it has been an intense feeling. Because Frank realizes, oh shit. Well, it's not stated out loud. The exact quote is, you look like a good kid. Or I've never had a friend like you. Who looked like you, a good kid. And, it's inferred that Frank is reminded of his son by Peter, or what his son would have been. Because Peter is supposedly 27 years old, because he was born in 2003, it's 2002, and it's 2028. Or, fuck, what was it? He was born in the early 2000s, and the movie takes place in 2028. But, he was lived for 5 years. He's essentially 22 during the movie. And, that's the same age Frank's son would have been. And so they have this back and forth heart to heart moment. And Frank essentially gives, now that he's finally awake, Peter an opening to leave by putting on the mask and gloves and just cheering. Peter leaves the hospital, still injured, but all in good shape. And he realizes he hasn't been alone this entire time. He is walking around New York, and it's like, oh, all these people care about me. All these people came out here to support me because, he doesn't say it out loud, but he's just happy to be surrounded by supporters. And we learned that while he was unconscious, DODC is being investigated for breaking humanitarian laws. We learned that Jean Grey is leaving and doing her own thing now, which we're assuming is a build up to the mutant saga. And Peter is continuing to do Spider-Man things. The movie ends in the most self-interpretive way you can imagine, with Peter going up to Ned, who is at a coffee shop or a bodega, I can't remember, and he offers him a handshake saying, hey, I'm Peter, instead of lying about who he was like he did earlier in the movie. And in that moment, it's one of those he moved on kind of situations. He's realized he can't do it by himself. And he does the handshake with Ned. You know the handshake. And somehow, some way, Ned remembers it. Whether it's muscle memory, even though he forgot the very person he only did the handshake with, or if it's him actually remembering Peter. And the movie ends right there. The end scene is either Spider-Verse or Battle World, who knows. Yeah, the movie was solid as fuck. Emotional as all hell. The ending was weak in terms of how it played out. But it's one of those movies where I do think anyone and everyone should watch it because of how good it is. That being said, I have to make a review on He-Man Masters of the Universe, which I think we unfortunately let flop. And there was a third movie. I'll remember it. That's right, Batman Nightfall, which came out recently as well. So, that being said, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to get this posted as soon as possible, and I will hopefully finish Absolute Green Lantern by next week.